Imagine a beast weighing over 100 tons. Fully loaded, that's heavier than 15 Abrams tanks, barreling down a 20-degree icy slope in the dead of winter. No rails to guide it, no airbags, just a thin ribbon of compacted snow and ice, cracked and treacherous, flanked by 1,000-foot drop-offs into jagged rock and frozen riverbeds below. One slip, and 150 tons of momentum turns it into an unstoppable avalanche of steel and timber. This wasn't some Hollywood stunt. This was the Pacific P16, the logging industry's forgotten leviathan, king of the winter woods. Designed in the brutal Pacific Northwest timberlands, it hauled loads that would snap lesser trucks like twigs. But on those logging roads, steep serpentine paths carved into mountainsides, the P16 wasn't just a truck, it was a gamble with physics itself. Why did men climb into its armored cab, knowing full well that a single mistake could send them plummeting into oblivion? How deadly was the Pacific P16 really on these ice roads? Not the flat frozen lakes you see in trucker reality shows, but the real killers, sheer mountain descents where gravity rules and mercy is a myth. To understand the terror, you have to go back to the roaring heart of America's industrial might, the post-World War II logging boom. It was the 1950s, and the Pacific Northwest was a battlefield of axes and chainsaws. World War II had ravaged global timber supplies, and now the U.S. was rebuilding. Houses for returning GIs, crates for exports, paper for the booming economy. But the real prize lay high in the Cascades and Olympics, ancient forests of Douglas fir and cedar, giants that could yield boards for entire fleets of ships. The problem? Getting those titanic logs out. A single mature fir could weigh 50 tons on the stump. Conventional trucks, your Mack or international rigs, could handle maybe 20 tons on dry summer gravel. But come winter, when rains turned roads to mud and snow buried everything, they bogged down like hippopotamuses in molasses. Rail lines couldn't reach the high country. Airlifts? A joke for trees the size of redwoods. Enter Pacific Car and Foundry, the same geniuses who built Wallatu's tank cars and bridge girders. They needed a solution as extreme as the problem. A truck that could conquer winter logging roads, hauling 100 to 150 tons over inclines that laughed at lesser machines. Not for show, for survival. The timber industry employed tens of thousands, and shutdowns meant bankruptcies. Breadlines in mill towns like Everett and Aberdeen. Born in 1952, the P16 was no ordinary semi. It was a behemoth engineered for apocalypse. 8 drive axles, 8, spanning 30 feet, powered by twin Detroit diesel 16 V71 engines, each churning 1,000 horses like twin locomotives under the hood. That's 2,000 horsepower total, enough to propel a battleship. But power alone doesn't conquer ice. Pacific armored it like a tank, a cab of quarter-inch steel plate designed to shrug off falling branches or worse. Yet necessity birthed nightmare. These weren't the ice road truckers' lakes, flat, forgiving expanses where you could fishtail and recover. Logging roads were vertical warfare. Switchbacks with 20–25% grades, surfaces of glare ice under 18 inches of powder snow, rutted by previous runs. Summer lowboys floated logs on 40-foot trailers. Winter demanded overloads, stacks of 100-foot spars lashed with cables that could slice a man in half. The P16 filled the void. By 1955, fleets of them prowled the woods, resurrection machines hauling what nature hoarded. But every ascent promised a descent from hell. Load it too heavy, and the weight distribution turned the beast rear heavy, a pendulum eager to swing forward on the downslope. Drivers, grizzled men named Hank or Earl, chain-smoked in cabs reeking of oil and wet wool, praying the physics would hold. Why risk it? Because America hungered for wood. One P16 could do the work of 5 conventional rigs, keeping mills fed, paychecks flowing. In the Cold War era, timber meant strength. Houses for the masses, pallets for missiles. The P16 wasn't built. It was forged in the fire of economic desperation. But as the snow deepened and the roads iced over, the true face of this titan emerged. What made it legendary also made it lethal. The air brakes, massive S-cam foundations clamping 48-inch drums, worked fine on gravel. On ice? Useless. Lock the wheels and you slid like a bobsled. The salvation was the Jake brake. engine compression roaring like a wounded dragon, decelerating through sheer mechanical fury. One wrong downshift into neutral, called running away, and exponential acceleration took over. 60 seconds from control to catastrophe. Many P16s litter ravines today, twisted memorials to momentum's wrath. The cab might hold, but the logs stack behind, a battering ram of splintered fury. How many men did this implacable brute claim? And could skill alone tame its deadly heart? The answers lie in its anatomy, and the screams echoing from those frozen chasms. To grasp the Pacific P16's deadly duality, savior of the timberlands, reaper of the unwary, you must dissect its anatomy. This wasn't a truck assembled in a factory showroom. It was a colossus forged in the Renton, Washington yards of Pacific Car and Foundry, where welders in asbestos masks hammered steel like shipbuilders crafting an ark for the apocalypse. Start with the skeleton, a ladder-frame chassis of high-tensile alloy steel beams, 12 inches deep, riveted and welded into a spine that could flex without snapping under 150 tons. Spanning nearly 50 feet bumper to bumper, it rode on a staggering 18 wheels, 10 duals rearward, configured as 8 drive axles in a push-pull tandem setup. Why 8? Torque multiplication. Each axle housed planetary gear hubs, reducing ratios up to 10:1, turning the raw fury of the engines into ground-gripping adhesion that clawed through 18 inches of powder snow like talons on flesh. But the black heart pulsed in the powertrain. Twin Detroit Diesel Series 71 16-cylinder engines, each a 1,920 cubic inch monster, naturally aspirated roots blower superchargers howling like banshees. Engine startup sequence, roots blower whine building to a staccato put-put-put rumble, exhaust stacks belching black smoke. These weren't your garden variety millers. The 16 V71s fired on a 2-stroke cycle, 1,000 horsepower apiece at 2,100 RPM, idling with a seismic throbbing that shook snow from overhead branches. Allied via a custom splitter box, they delivered 2,000 horses through a Spicer 24-speed twin-stick transmission. 2 gear levers, one for low-range crawl, the other for highway hurl. Double-clutching those H-pattern shifters demanded balletic precision. Miss a sink and gears ground like millstones, risking a catastrophic strip. This transmission wasn't mere metal. It was the P16's lifeline on ice. The Jake brake, exhaust retarder valves chopping cylinder compression, transformed deceleration into a symphony of savagery. Sound design peaks. Jake brake, erupting in staccato roars, echoing off canyon walls like machine gun fire. Engaged via a cab switch, it bellowed at 100+ decibels, slowing the beast by modulating engine RPM without wheel lockup. On glare ice, where air brakes, 18 massive chambers feeding S-cam actuators on 48-inch drums, offered zero bite. The Jake was divinity. Compress those cylinders and vacuum-sucked speed from the momentum monster, dropping 20 mph in seconds on a 20% grade. Yet power bred peril. Fuel thirst, 100 gallons per hour at full roar, slurped from saddle tanks flanking the frame. Cooling? Twin radiators the size of billboards, thermostatically controlled, battling steam plumes that could blind a driver in fog. The drive shafts, 5-inch diameter, slip-yoked, whipped like bullwhips under torque loads exceeding 50,000 foot-pounds. U-joints the size of baseballs straining to transmit apocalypse. Forward, the armored citadel, a cab wrapped in 1/4-inch AR-500 steel plate, bolted over a reinforced cab-over structure. No glass chicken coop here. Sloped like a tank turret to deflect tumbling spars, with armored glass ports barely 6 inches wide. Inside, a pedestal seat bolted to the floor absorbed G-forces. Controls arrayed like a bomber cockpit. Air gauges clustered at 250 psi. Pyrometers watching exhaust temps crest 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Cab walk-through animation. Gauges flickering. Levers etched with wear, cigarette butts in ashtray. The Loadmaster's arsenal. A fifth-wheel hitch rated for 100,000 pounds dynamic load, lashed to pole trailers stacked with 100-foot logs cabled in a cat's cradle of half-inch steel. Rear heavy by design, 60% of weight aft. The P16 teetered on descents, logs shifting like a guillotine blade itching to swing. Stabilizers? Deployable outriggers for loading. But on the road it was naked physics. Center of gravity 8 feet high, begging rollover on switchbacks. Electrics ran on 24-volt military-grade batteries, alternators spinning 200 amps to power winches that could yank a stalled sister truck uphill. Hydraulics? Full power steering and wet disc brakes on steers, but rears relied on engine braking supremacy. This anatomy screamed overkill, because the logging roads demanded it. Cascade switchbacks, rutted by cat tracks, iced to a mirror sheen by freeze-thaw cycles. Ascending, the P16 low-crawled at 3 mph in granny low, twins lugging at 800 RPM, smoke veiling the pines. Descending, the ritual. Pin the Jake, feather the left stick into compound low, right stick matching road speed. Vibration rattled teeth. Oil aromas mingled with pine sap and fear sweat. One neutral slip, thunk into overdrive, and velocity snowballed, 20 mph to 60 in heartbeats. Brakes glowing cherry red, useless. Many P16s met doom not from design flaw, but human frailty amplifying mechanical wrath. Gears stripped, drive shafts grenaded, sending shards through frames. Logs breached cables, pulverizing cabs like sardine tins. Yet the beast endured. Suspension leaf packs, 40 leaves per spring, 2 inches thick, absorbed ravine kisses that would crumple lesser rigs. In its viscera lay legend and lethality, a symphony of steel symbiotically fused, demanding mastery to survive. But even perfected anatomy bowed to the ultimate adversary, the frozen gauntlet awaiting beyond the tree line. What happened when this titan met the mountain's maw head-on? Word count 872. Dawn breaks over the Cascades like a reluctant witness, painting the treetops in blood-red hues as the Pacific P16 crests the final switchback. Aerial drone shot, colossal truck silhouetted against jagged peaks, exhaust plumes curling like dragon breath in sub-zero air. Earl Harlan grips the twin sticks, knuckles white on worn bakelite knobs, his breath fogging the armored glass slit. 30 years hauling death-defying loads, but today the mountain whispers threats. The load behind, 140 tons of hemlock spars, 100-foot behemoths lashed in steel netting, shifting imperceptibly with every jolt. Rear heavy, center of gravity swaying like a hangman's noose. The descent begins, grade 22%. Surface, glare ice from overnight freeze, topped by 6 inches of wind-packed powder, ruts frozen into lethal grooves. No guardrails. Left, sheer drop to a ravine 800 feet deep, spiked with talus and ice-crusted boulders. Right, granite wall, scarred by previous impacts. Slow-motion tracking shot. Tires. Massive 18 ORZOX25 earth movers, biting tentatively into ice. Micro cracks spiderwebbing outward. Earl feathers the throttle to idle. Engages the Jake brake. Sound crescendo. Twin Detroit's downshift with a guttural whoomp whoomp. Roots blowers whining down. Then the Jake erupts. Burrap, burrap, burrap. A thunderous staccato echoing like artillery in the narrow chute. Compression valves slam shut, choking each cylinder's exhaust, converting kinetic fury into acoustic hell. Deceleration bites, 15 mph drops to 8 in seconds, the chassis shuddering as 150 tons fights inertia. Vibration rattles the parameters, exhaust gas temps spiking to 100 degrees, orange glow flickering under the stacks. Oil pressure steady at 80 psi, but sweat beads on Earl's brow, mixing with the cab's perpetual reek of diesel fumes, hydraulic fluid, and stale tobacco. Physics is the invisible assassin. Momentum, mass times velocity. At 150 tons, even 10 mph harbors the energy of a freight train. On 22% ice, gravitational pull accelerates unchecked at 2G, faster than freefall. Air brakes? Engaged, but S-cams merely polish the drums. No friction, just a futile hiss of 250 psi bleeding to atmosphere. Cutaway animation, brake chambers contracting, shoes skating uselessly on ice-sheathed drums, sparks absent. The P16's genius demands ritual. Left stick to superlow, first overdrive. Right to compound direct. Double clutch smooth as silk. Miss it, and torque interruption floats the beast into neutral. Road à livre. Runaway. 10 minutes in, fatigue gnaws. Earl's been crawling up since midnight, chain slapping rhythm like war drums. Interior cab cam, Earl's eyes bloodshot, gloved hands dancing levers, tack needle hovering around 200 RPM. A gust shears powder across the ribbon road. Visibility drops to 50 feet. The load creaks, cables groaning under shift. Logs inching forward like predators scenting blood. He senses it. Rearward bias turning ferocious on the pitch. Downshift to 2LO. Grind. Synchromesh protests, but holds. Jake roars louder, drowning his heartbeat. Then the slip. Front steer tires hit a thaw freeze patch. A hidden pothole glazed mirror slick. High drama slow-mo, dual steers hydroplane, kingpins flexing, chassis slewing left toward abyss. Earl counters hard on power steering, hydraulics whining at 3,000 psi. But rear tandems follow, 8 axles surfing uncontrollably. Speed climbs, 12 mph. Jake maxed, but twins lugging too low, compression weakening. He grabs left stick for granny low, clutch out too fast. Thunk. Neutral, hell unleashes no engine drag. Pure gravity, acceleration surges, 20 mph in 5 seconds, 40 in 10. Wind howls through vents, cab tilting as momentum surges forward. Logs avalanche internally, cables snapping with rifle cracks. Twang, twang, half-inch steel parting like thread. Chaos montage, GoPro shake cam from cab. World blurring. Altimeter-style speedo spinning wildly. Rearview mirror shows log stack compressing forward like a ram. Earl mashes clutch, hunts reverse on right stick. Impossible at 50 mph. Brakes auto dump, but drums spin freewheeling glowing white-hot. Smoke billowing from hubs smelling of scorched asbestos and molten alloy. The ravine looms. Switchback hairpin, 30-degree turn. P16 plummets straight. Physics triumphant. Impact. Front bumper crumples against granite outcrop, but chassis ladders hold. Rivets shearing in sparks. Dramatic recreation. Full-scale model or CGI crash. Truck accordioning. Leaf springs compressing to coils. Axles buckling like matchsticks. Logs breach 50-ton spar spears, cab roof, quarter-inch steel crumpling inward. Earl's fortress becomes sarcophagus. Twin engines grenade. Pistons hold. Conrods flailing through blocks in a symphony of destruction. Fuel ignites, 100 gallons erupting in fireball, black smoke veiling the pines. This wasn't anomaly. By 1960, over 24 P16s scarred Cascade Gulches. Twisted hulks visible from helicopters today. Memorials to unchecked inertia. Archival B&W footage tint faded. Wrecked trucks in ravines, log jams choking creeks. Survivor interviews, grizzled faces recounting close calls. One 1958 incident on Matt Baker Highway, 3 P16s in convoy. Lead driver fatigues, neutrals on black ice. Chain reaction. Second slams into first at 70 mph. Logs tumbling like dominoes, pulverizing the third's cab. 4 dead mills idled weeks. Winter tallies. 20% loss rate per season for overload runs. Not design flaw. Operator error amplified by extremes. Heat from overworked brakes melted snow to steam, blinding windscreens. Vibration-induced gear failures stripped synchros mid-descent. Worst, log surge, where thawing cables let spars piston forward on panic stops, decapitating drivers through armored slits. Yet heroes emerged, legends like Iron Mike Kowalski, who tamed a runaway by side-slipping into powder drifts, Jake screaming nonstop for 14 miles, saving 120 tons from the Snoqualmie Gorge. Heroic reenactment, tense steering battle, powder exploding like surf, truck slewing to halt inches from edge. Skill was the thin veil over savagery, anticipating surge, modulating Jake RPM to 1,400 exactly, using road crown for camber grip. But the mountain claimed relentlessly. Sensory apocalypse defined the fray. Acrid brake smoke stinging eyes, metal fatigue screeching like banshees, ground-shaking thuds of shifting tonnage. Heart rates peaked 180 BPM, adrenaline souring the cab's fug. Survival hinged on prescience, reading ice sheen by headlight refraction, feeling load shift through seat bolts. The P16's climax wasn't victory parades, but these frozen duels where man pitted cunning against Leviathan mass. Triumphs fueled lore, failures fertilized the forests with steel graves. As regulations tightened, Overload bans by 68. These roads emptied, but echoes persist. How did this deadly dance fade, and what ghosts haunt its legacy today? Word count, 878. By the late 1960s, the Pacific P16's reign over the winter woods crumbled under the weight of progress and peril. Fade from crash wreckage to time-lapse, seasons cycling over rusting hulks and ravines, snow yielding to summer ferns. The U.S. Department of Transportation, born from a 1966 act amid rising highway carnage, clamped down on overloads. No more 150-ton behemoths thundering unchecked. Federal weight limits slashed to 80,000 pounds on interstates, trickling into logging permits. Environmental awakenings stirred. Sierra Club campaigns decried clear-cuts scarring the Cascades. Birth of the Endangered Species Act in '73 halting high country harvests. Mills mechanized with skidders and feller bunchers, sidelining the P16's brute force ballet. Pacific Car and Foundry pivoted to rail cars and off-highway rigs, their Renton yards echoing with ghosts of welders' hammers. Last P16s retired by 1972, auctioned to scrap yards or museums. Fleets dwindled, from 200-plus in peak 57 seasons to a handful limping through 70s thaws. Safer alternatives emerged, articulated haulers like the Caterpillar 773, rubber-tired with ABS precursors, crawling grades sans Jake brake symphonies. Helicopters airlifted spars, low-impact forwarding reduced road reliance. The logging roads themselves faded, reclaimed by alders and Devil's Club. Switchbacks eroded to game trails. Yet lethality etched immortality. Official tallies understated. Insurers logged 47 P16 catastrophes from 1952-68, but Milltown lore whispered triple that. Ravines from Snoqualmie Pass to Olympic rainforests cradled 24 skeletons, twisted chassis overgrown with moss, engines gutted by looters scavenging Detroit blocks for hot rods. Drone flyover, eerie graveyard of steel titans, vines snaking through cabs, faded Pacific insignia peeling like ancient runes. Insert rusted Jake brake valves, frozen in mid-roar. One near Matt. Index, a 1964 runaway. Cab pulverized. Logs fanned like pickup sticks over a creek. Driver Earl Harlan's helmet found decades later. Visor cracked but intact. His legend born from survival. Crawling miles with shattered legs. Today, the P16 resurrects in niche reverence. A pristine 59 model hunkers in the Northwest Museum of Forestry in Shelton, Washington, restored by volunteers grinding 50 years of corrosion. Twin 16 V71s purring on ethanol blends for demo runs. Museum walkthrough, gleaming chassis under spotlights, crowds murmuring. Startup footage, Roots blowers keening to life, crowd cheers. Reenactment fleets thrill at logging shows like the Elma Thunderwood Jamboree, tiptoeing modern replicas on graded paths, Jake brakes echoing for millennials glued to phones. YouTube salvages footage, grainy Super 8 of 60s convoys, viral clips dissecting wrecks via LiDAR scans, revealing how leaf springs absorbed 100 green impacts. Survivors' tales fuel podcasts, grizzled octogenarians recounting the dance, that razor-edge mastery of downshifts where one neutral slip summoned Armageddon. Modern truckers nod knowingly. Today's Peterbilts borrow P16 DNA. Engine brakes standard, planetary axles de rigueur, but sanitized airbags and computers neutering the raw gamble. Climate shifts mock the era, milder winters, thin ice roads, electric haulers whisper where Detroit's bellowed. The P16's deadliness? Quantified brutally. A 28% rollover risk per overload descent per NIOSH retro studies. Fatality rate triple semi-averages. It claimed perhaps 60 souls, not from malice but unforgiving math. 150 tons at 40 milliprocents packing 20 megajoules, equivalent to a Hellfire missile. Yet it hauled 2 million board feet annually per rig, fueling the post-war boom that housed a nation. In the end, the Pacific P16 wasn't villain or victim. It was the unyielding forge of an industrial age when men wrestled nature's giants with grit and gears, betting lives on momentum's knife edge. As steel yields to silicon and forests to fabs, its hulks whisper a timeless truth. True titans fall not to rivals but to the hubris of harnessing gods, Gravity, inertia, the implacable hunger of progress itself. In those frozen chasms, America's roaring 20s of timber echo eternal. Build boldly, but fear the beast you unleash.